Hey friends, we have some books to chat about. Hi, how are ya? So in terms of my reading, I'm still feeling, I wouldn't say slumpy. I think I'm just relearning how to divvy my time. I have to text her back. I'm so sorry, Dina. But Dina and I were having a really interesting conversation about how sometimes being in online spaces that are dedicated to specific hobbies have you tailoring your personality to an algorithm, and how we are wide and we contain multitudes. And so let us touch grass and let us do the other things. So I think I'm still trying to just like learn the balance in that. But I do feel like I've started to naturally cut out some things in order to just make more time for reading, which is good. I feel like I've been reading this book Wintering by Katherine May repeatedly for various years, and this was the first year that I like kind of got to implement it. I've been apologizing for being slower in the winter, and I have to stop doing that, but it was really nice to kind of take a step back, be slow, and sometimes seek my own company and not push myself to do a ton of things. And then as the weather started to get nice and as our days started to get a little bit longer, it's been really beautiful to kind of see myself aligning with, this is gonna sound so woo-woo, but seeing myself align with like the natural world. There are all these little blooms that I've been catching, and I feel like I'm a little bit in bloom. And yeah, it's just been nice to allow my body to sync up with like the natural rhythms of the world. Anyway, I haven't read a ton, but the books that I read were really, really good. So the first book I read, is this quarter 2? In the spring, was highly anticipated. I feel like low-key my new release radar video was kind of like manifestation, because I've been reading a lot of those books, so I'm very happy about that. But I read All Fours by Miranda July. This is my first venture into July, and I knew I would love this. I knew we're right here. So we have this middle-aged woman. She is a mom in a marriage. Her and her husband are having this conversation about how there are two types of people in the world. You have your drivers and you have your parkers. Drivers are people who sort of pursue, are active, are sort of like about it, right? Like they're constantly making moves, whereas parkers are nesters. They're people who settle in. While one has a lot of forward motion, the other is looking to find comfort and find meaning. And she's like, I am not a parker. How dare you call me a parker? In fact, I'm going to prove to you I'm not a parker by taking a road trip to New York. So she plans this road trip. It's going to be X amount of days, and she's proving to everyone that she is in fact a driver, not a parker. She embarks on this road trip, stops for gas about 15 minutes outside of her hometown, encounters this like Hertz driver, finds this motel, and ends up just nestling in the hotel for the entirety of the road trip. She ends up hiring the wife of the Hertz driver to renovate the motel room so that she can make it beautiful and encounter beauty every day. And then eventually she finds herself deeply attracted to the Hertz employee. And so essentially this book is about a middle-aged woman rediscovering pleasure, what it means to find pleasure in your midlife, what it means to be a sexual being in your middle life, and redefining what it means to desire. It's full of yearning. In her affair with Davy, there is so much longing to the point of like frustration for me. It's just all of this like skirting around one another. She just ends up defining and redefining her life, her marriage, pursuits of pleasure in a really funny, unexpected, and very playful way. This was a really playful book. She's so strange in the best in the best sense of that word. If I had read this book before I had made my Aquarius coded videos, it would absolutely be in that video. She's just exploring what is intimacy. There's this really interesting scene where her and Davy are having this intimate moment, but there's no sex involved, and I think that was really cool. It was a really interesting exploration. So yeah, this is just about a woman rediscovering being like a alive being after women are often forgotten. I really, really enjoyed this book. It was really funny. It was a trip. It was a ride. It was a time. Also, Miranda July is a director. She makes films. I'm just so curious about her. I would love to read her other stuff. It's not listed here, but I would love to read her other stuff. I'd love to watch a film that she's produced. I am so tickled by this writer. She is awesome. I was reading this on the train and cackling. This had a lot of people doing that to me because I just had a really good time reading it. Then I read The Wren by Enright. So this is a book that is looking at generations within a family. So we have a mom, Carmel, and her daughter, I was gonna say Nell. It is Nell. Yes, Nell and Carmel. We learned that Carmel's father, the poet, the Irish poet who is beloved by so many, ended up leaving his mother when she became ill. He often says she became ill and then the relationship sort of died. The sort of loss and absence of her father is something that Carmel carries throughout her life, but it's interesting because then Nell sort of embodies a lot of the personality of the grandfather. So essentially this is just a multi-generational story that is looking at these two women and what it looks like for them to find relationship, to find understanding of self. Nell is someone who seeks freedom, but also is very naive in how she pursues relationships. She quickly falls in love and becomes tangled in these borderline abusive relationships. We see Carmel and how she is very cautious and she is skeptical when she enters relationships because of the sort of template that her father had set up for her. They talk about how Carmel sort of sees her body as this very practical thing, where Nell is questioning and seeking pleasure through her body and reminding herself how alive she is and how she can feel all of that through her body. Yeah, and we see just how different these two women can be. We see how Carmel, who has a lot more proximity to the realities of what a passionate love can bring, and not farcical because the love between her father and her mother did exist at one point, but how easy it was to sort of abandon that love when things became difficult. So you see sort of the remnants of that and how Carmel moves throughout relationships. And it also just talks about the reverb of the people that come before us. I think I oftentimes read books about women who are ambivalent about motherhood or pushing against motherhood, but it was really interesting to read from the perspective of a woman who gave herself fully over to motherhood and saw it as a way to rectify and also as something that belonged solely to her. I think because of her experiences with her parents, she was very skeptical of romance, this fleeting kind of love, and I think that Carmel sought love, true love, in that mother-daughter relationship. So I think it was looking at that. I think it was looking at the different kinds of love, whether it be romantic or familial, and how sort of the things that we inherit, maybe not even explicitly, but how those things color how we approach certain relationships. I feel like a lot of the times I'm interested in this for various reasons, but how people can have like a specific outward politic. It doesn't have to be political, but like a certain outward perception, and then in their interpersonal can act in a completely different way. Yeah, it was just interesting to see these two women try to reconcile and approach and sort of create a relationship to this patriarch in their family, because we see the granddaughter sort of use him as a guide. We see the poetry interspersed throughout this book. She finds that she relates to a lot of it. We see how Carmel's father oftentimes spoke to Carmel through his poetry, but that Carmel was always a little bit skeptical of it because of the reality of what his absence meant for the family. I really enjoyed this. This is a book that had really beautiful passages. I'll read you some. I went to a coffee shop and I was writing them, and they're beautiful, but they're also so long and I was getting little cramps in my hands. Waiting for this man was better than being with him. It was certainly more intense, the way longing kept eating itself and giving birth to more longing. And nothing but nothing was better than that first flash of arrival. So good! Also this theme about how we fall in love and also how we resist that. It's Nell's part. She says, I was down the corridor and into the echoing stairwell. I was down the steps and out the glass door before I fell in love. It didn't happen below his window where I was slicked briefly by the possibility of his gaze. It happened as I turned the corner out of view. Bam, I was in love. I stopped, stared at the path, and then carried on, full of self-hugging secret joy. Love. Bam. It kept happening on the bus. Bam. And getting off the bus, the hidden delight. The street becoming a meaningful street. Bam. It just kept happening and rising. The knowledge, the beauty, the hopefulness. My feet not touching the ground. My cheek not feeling the air. The love, the swoop, the swoon. The blood mashing in my ears. The any moment now, the any second now he will call. The beauty of the day. The beauty of the sky. The jolt of missed time. And had I missed it? Did he text? Is my battery dead? Did I pick up someone else's phone now? If I see 5 magpies, 3 yellow Mini Coopers, if I read every horoscope, he will text me, he will love me, he will call. The curtains drawn, the not calling, the not messaging, the not yet, the not yet, not yet, the love, the love. I don't know. I feel like she does limerence really well. Sort of like the obsessive iteration of romantic love. We walked around town. He said, I like the way you do the sky. My mother never could figure out the weather. You'd see her half mad running around the wash line. It was always a surprise. Like, how long do you have to be looking up at it? But the rain, fuck it. The rain, it stops you thinking, and that's not a bad thing. He touched my face and said, you spent a lot of time looking. He kissed me and we were making out right there while pedestrians gathered at the lights. and walked across and gathered again. Red man, green man, red. This is what happens when people are struck by lightning. Confusion, seizures, dizziness, muscle aches, deafness, headaches, memory deficits, destructibility, personality changes, and chronic pain. Some people say that after they were struck by lightning, they were able to do new things. One man said he felt the approach of snow in his bones. He knew the weather before it arrived. Or sometimes when he walked along a corridor, a light fixture blew over his head. This is not what happened to me when I fell in love. Similar, but no. So yeah, if you're wanting a book that is following generations of women, exploring romantic love, exploring the things that we inherit from our parents, exploring also, I was reading an interview with Anne when she was talking about the power of translation. I don't think I got that fully, but if you have a bigger brain than I do, then this is also discussing and exploring translation. And I think like what it means to sobresaltarse o sobresalir, ¿cómo se traduce esto? Overcome. Like how do you overcome the things that we have inherited and sort of allow yourself to go on your own path. I really enjoyed this book. Beautiful writing, really great characters. The audiobook was also pretty good. Yeah, and there's some poetry if you're into that. This book we read in the month, not in the month, in this quarter, in this little nugget of time was Sula by Toni Morrison. This is my third reread of Sula. I got this book when I went to Chicago way back when I was doing a psychology conference there, and we went to Afterwards. I got this book there, had it on my shelf for a bit and didn't read it until 2021. So this is how I've been tracking the different reads of this, but it's gotten to a point where I don't think I like have space to read in it, if that makes sense. So this is kind of the situation in here, just like years of tracking and whatever. So I was actually thinking I'm gonna get another copy of Sula, and that's gonna be my read-only copy. I don't know how that's gonna work because I feel like I always want to annotate, but I just feel like it's gotten kind of hard to move through this book. And then at some point I just feel like I'm gonna have entire pages highlighted. I don't even know what it means to like passively read this book, so maybe that's not gonna happen. But if you've not heard me speak about this book ad nauseum now, this is a book about two friends, Nel and Sula, who live up at the bottom. The book starts off with looking at the generation of women that come before Nel and Sula. So we're looking at Helene Wright, Nel's mom, and the Peace women, so Eva Peace and Hannah Peace. We're looking at how they sort of embed themselves in society, what their membership in the community means, and then we sort of meet Nel and Sula. We sort of see how they become linked, the sort of things that they see in each other, the sort of potential they see in each other, shared traumatic experiences, what they inherit from the women before them, and then what it looks like for them to move through life. Nel is a woman who is really conformed and sort of goes along with the expectations that are set for women. Sula is a woman who is driven by her whims, only interested in doing things if the thing brings her pleasure. I sort of watch Nel and Sula attempt to, I don't know, navigate Sula's desire and what she wants in the world, and how that desire is really sort of like mismatched with the realities. This book is exploring expectations around marriage, around motherhood. It's exploring what it means to have a life well lived, what it means to be responsible for other people. The writing is so beautiful. Every time I read this, I'm always just really struck again and again and again by how masterful the writing is in this. I remember the first time I read this was my third Morrison that I read. And I remember a friend who was not on Bookstagram, because I did read it with a whole bunch of Bookstagram people. A friend that was not on Bookstagram I had invited to join us in our buddy read. And I remember that after we read this, I like went and apologized to her. And I was like, listen, don't judge Morrison on this book. This is not her best book. Like, read Song of Solomon, read The Bluest Eye. Like, I promise you, like, don't judge her on this book, because I really thought that this was pretty mid the first time I read it. I was like, this book moved way too fast. She was doing way too much. And I think that was because I was reading for plot. I was like, what's happening? She set who on fire? Like, it was just really confusing, and I felt like a lot of stuff was happening. I felt like Morrison wasn't landing anywhere. She wasn't giving us a breath. She was just dropping sentences and moving on to the next thing, where I just wanted to sit and process. For like a year, I was like, this book, it's really not my favorite. And I remember I spoke to two friends on Bookstagram. One friend, he has a video of him, Achille, throwing this book in the trash. But yeah, for a year, I was kind of just like, this is not the best Morrison. Then the year after that, during Tiny's week, I picked it up again, and I was like, Oh my god, I cannot believe that I was walking around this planet speaking ill of this book. I felt like I saw so much more. I was able to smell and see and feel and touch and just understand way more of what she was doing in this book on my second read. Because I feel like with Song of Solomon, which was a book that I had read directly before this, I felt like I pretty much got it. I know I didn't. I know I only got maybe like 50% of that book, but it was really easy to follow because it's super cinematic. Like I feel like with that book, you don't even really need to understand everything. You're just there for the ride. And that's a really plotty book. A lot of these large scenes that you get to just sink into. Whereas with this one, there's not so much plot. So I read this for a book club and someone had said that this is not really a character study book. It's more of like a community study, which I really, really agree with. So yeah, so the second time I read this book, my takeaway was just like, whoa, she has a lot to say about motherhood and marriage and sort of pushing against that expectation. And I was like, Morrison is that girl. Morrison is spreading the good word and she is providing us an alternative to what a different life can look like. And then I saw that interview where Morrison's like, no, Sula is a deplorable character. And I was like, I don't know what to believe. But Morrison says that Sula is deplorable because Sula doesn't have a sense of responsibility towards anyone. Being so self-directed is no bueno. She also talks about what would it look like for a woman to have like full license to do whatever they want, to not have any gays stopping them. What would that look like? And that's sort of where Sula emerged from. The third read of it made me cry. This read of it made me cry because I never picked up on the loneliness. Sula was imagining a really wide world. She was imagining a world filled with possibilities beyond this really circumscribed idea of what it meant to be a woman. And I think that she was sort of banking on her connection with Nell to grant her access into that really wide life. And Nell, not betrayed, but like disappointed her in sort of folding into the expectation, into a small life, as I think Sula would conceptualize it. I felt this sense of Sula yearning and seeking and searching for a community, but never being able to find that. I think for Sula, it's heartbreaking because I think she always thought that her and Nell would be here. And I don't know, Nell didn't get the memo. And Nell sort of just conformed with everyone else. So yeah, so it made me really sad. But the things that I really enjoyed this read picking up on was the theme around inheritance, sort of like the patterns we replicate. I was actually just talking because Kat from Lit with Kat is also just reading this. And we were chatting about the peace women and how all of the peace women love men. That's sort of like the first thing you learn about them. And we learned that Eva is a woman who engages a man's mind. Hannah, Eva's daughter, is a woman who engages a man's body. And this is okay. If you are just doing the mind thing, that's all right. If that's all you're doing, if you're a woman of the body, that's quite all right, as long as that's all you're doing. And it's okay, like the community was okay with it. I think in part because Eva and Hannah still felt part of the community, they still engaged with the community, they still had a sense of care for the community. Whereas Sula, who embodied or inherited both, she was a woman of the mind and a woman of the body, and those two things together make a whole person. And I think that was dangerous and that was threatening, and I think that aligned with her lack of care for the community made her ostracized and pariahed. That theme was really interesting to sort of hone in on this time. As I read Morrison over and over again and I read more of her work, I really have picked up on how she demonstrates love and how love shows up in different ways. And I think in this book we always saw like the ugliest side of love because there was always like a desire to save someone in killing them. So there were all of these like mercy killings within the book. And I have a theory. I'm gonna say my theory. So maybe if you've not read Sula and you're curious about it, I'm gonna put a timestamp somewhere. But let me know what you think about this theory. We have Eva who kills Plum because Plum has become addicted to drugs and he's not really living a life, and she wants to sort of release him from that difficulty and that lack of a life. And so Eva kills her son. Hannah, the jury's still out on what happens to Hannah. Does she set herself on fire? Does something happen? Because with Hannah, it was like she learns that her mother had this idea of, I loved you through care. We were trying to survive, and so my love for you was making sure that you were fed and you were cared for. There was a roof over your head. I don't have time for all that playing and that coddling nonsense. And so when she learns of that lack of love in the way that I think maybe Hannah craved, the day after all of a sudden she catches on fire. There's also a little bit of a metaphoric death when Sula overhears Hannah talking to the women of the community about whether or not Hannah loves Sula, and she's like, yeah, I love her. That doesn't mean I like her. Sula overhearing this, that's the scene right before Nell and Sula run into the field and dig the little grave, and then Chicken Little dies. I don't know. It's like all of these questions about love. I feel like there's a precedent. Oh, we also have Eva who does whatever she has to do to get her insurance money, perhaps put her leg under a train track to get it. So we see all of these really extreme sacrifices for love, even if that means killing your own kid. At the end, I think that Nell also performs a mercy killing on Sula. Sula's on her deathbed. She is not free. She's not able to do anything. She's sort of just like bedbound. And I think that maybe Nell saw this as antithetical to who Sula was. Sula sought freedoms and pursued freedoms, and to see her bedbound. I don't know that Nell had this explicit thought, but I think that when she went out to get medicine, she actually got some type of poison, came back, gave Sula the poison, because Sula dies immediately after. So that's my thought. I think that Nell also performs a mercy killing because she loves Sula and she doesn't want to see Sula in a position of the thing that she fought and sought her whole life to avoid, which was like a constraint or an inability to pursue freedom. So that's my little theory on Nell being a murderer as well. I also still don't understand the ending of that book, but that's okay. And then yeah, when Sula sleeps with good old Jude, Nell's husband, I think every time I read this, I have a clear backing around my feelings towards the big betrayal. I feel like when I read it the second time, I was like, yeah, it's just like, you know, Sula and Nell are like this. And so I think I see it as Sula really had the expectation that her and Nell would be each other's other. They mentioned this in the book before, but even when they were younger, they would exchange notes on what it was to kiss this person or what it was like to be with this person. And so I don't think that Sula had a conceptualization of possession. I think that she really thought that it was her and Nell to the end. What is mine is yours, what is yours is mine. And that Nell wouldn't find it as a betrayal because the main person in Nell's life was not Jude. It should have been Sula. This is a very abstract reading of that scene, but I feel like that's how I interpreted it. And I feel like the realization that you are not your person's first person was really heartbreaking for Sula. And then, you know, she tried to seek community in other ways, but I feel like I have at least become more solidified in my justification or like my lack of anger around the whole Jude nel+sula little fiasco. I know that in book club, people were saying that if Sula really cared about Nell, she wouldn't have done that. But again, I really do feel like Sula did not even have this like concept of that's your main person. I think in the book it sort of depicts Sula's disappointment with the fact that Nula, I keep calling her Nula because in my brain, Nell and Sula are one. I don't think that she had a conceptualization that Nell centered anyone else but her. And so it's always heartbreaking to realize that that's not it. And then in the end, I think Nell realizes that no, it really was Sula who was her partner, her other. Yeah, and I think that especially when we think about all the scenes where, I don't know, when Sula comes back and Nell becomes animated all of a sudden, I know there's like little hints. She says right before that there had been like a gray web that had grown over her heart in the years that she had been with Jude. And then when Sula comes, all of that is gone and she sees the world with color again and everything is bright and she's able to laugh, and like her kids had never seen her laugh like that before. I kind of low-key feel like this book is super socialist because I feel like there's like a reimagining. I don't know, I feel like had Nell and Sula been homies right now, they would be in like a platonic partnership, like a platonic marriage, and would live in like a commune somewhere. I think Sula could learn mutual aid and care, and I think that her and Sula would have a time together. That was my reading of Sula. I love this book. I will probably reread it. I think it's just so crazy how different your reads can be and the things that you pull out of it. I also really feel like it has a lot in part to do with where I have been in life when I have read this book. You bring so much to your reading of a Morrison. I said this before in my last video, but it makes me emotional, but I'm so grateful that we have someone like Morrison who makes order of the world in the most genuine sense of the word, beautiful way. I don't know where I would be without Morrison. I'd probably be here, but like with a less complex understanding of self. So yeah, I'm not sure what my next Morrison will be. I've also been reading a lot of Morrisons this year, which is very unlike me, but I read Jazz. Sula was a reread, and I'm about to reread The Bluest Eye as well. Yeah, I'm not sure what my next, I kind of want to reread Song of Solomon. Paradise really intimidates me. Maybe I'll try again with Love, because people have said that Love is really crazy. The next book I read, this one I read on audio. It took me a really long time to move through. It was the last book in the acotar series. I'm not going to talk much about it. It's A Court of Silver Flames. The first few books are following Farah and her love interests, to not spoil anything. And then the last book explores Farah's sister, who we have a kind of fraught relationship with because of their relationship in the books, but it was really fun to follow Nesta. Nesta is super temperamental, but also like really sexually liberated. This last book was full on corn. Like, it was just with a little bit of plot sprinkled in. It was fine, it was fun. Yeah, that was that. And I guess what else has been going on this month? I haven't really done many art like exhibits or museum. I did go see Problemista, which was so nice. It was so sweet. It made me cry. It is a movie about Alejandro. He immigrates to the US. He's from El Salvador. Is that correct? Sí, son de El Salvador. He moves to the US to be a toy designer for Hasbro. And that's his dream. He just wants to create these toys, and he has all of these whimsical, quirky ideas for toys, like these Cabbage Patch dolls that like snap each other, or a doll that you can express medical anxiety about random things that pop up in your body. Like very, very whimsical things. And the movie sort of looks at how difficult and how kind of absurdist the process for sponsorship and path to citizenship is, and the sort of things, the sort of ways that we have to sell ourselves, sort of relinquish our dignity, and kind of like the impossibility of that process. There's also like a weird through line where people are freezing themselves in order to awaken in the future, but like process is really not solidifying. So he's working with this woman who was married to an artist who has frozen himself, and he's like her assistant, and she is quite reactive and kind of like hysterical, but she's always sort of making her needs known. And this pairing of someone who's like really submissive and muted, and someone who is quite like histrionic in her advocacy for herself, was a really interesting pairing. And I think he learns a lot from her. And the ending scene where he like stands up to Hasbro because they start to steal his ideas was just so cute. It was just a really cute movie, and I really recommend it. I think it was an A24 movie, which I think I'm vibing with a little more. Like that would not have been my thing like a year or two ago, but I'm vibing with it. So I really like that film. I also went to this really cool event. So I live uptown Manhattan. There's a big Dominican population here. Two friends started a cafe together, and they talk about wanting to bring cafe and community uptown. So they had a really nice, they just reached out to me and were like, hey, we're having this private event for Women's Day. You're invited to come. And I was like, I have no idea what this is, but yeah, I'm down. Me and my friend Casey went, and it was so sweet. It was just like a bunch of creatives, and the intention was just to network, and it was just pure intention. Like they closed down their business to just have all these women gather and encourage networking, and I met like so many incredible women, and it was just so cool and sweet. This year I feel like the word has definitely been community, and it's something that I have been looking for a long time, but I just felt really grateful after. And she gave like these little personalized notes because she had little gift bags for everyone. It was just the cutest thing. And I saw that they're having a silent reading event. I literally this weekend signed up for it's called Reading Rhythms, so I'll be doing that sometime in April. And yeah, and now there's one local to me, which is always fun. Very happy about that. But yeah, those are the books and things that were done in this time space. I am currently, I feel like I've finally gotten back into it, knock on wood, like I'm not jinxing anything. But this book, really funny so far. This book, we know how we feel about Claire Keegan, so I'm very curious to see what my final thoughts will be on this, but I finally got my Holden from the library. I also just got an ALC of Funny Story by Emily Henry. I am so excited. I started listening to it last night and it was so good. I'm very excited about that. And then I am also listening to Cultish by Amanda Montell, which I'm also really, really enjoying. I just got to the chapter where they're talking about Jonestown, and I had no idea that most of the people who were recruited into Jonestown were Black people, and he was sort of like using leftist speak to get people in and then would not let people leave, and how that was sort of like a coerced incident. Anyway, I am very riveted. I can't believe it took me this long to pick it up, but I was with some friends and we were joking about cults, and I was like, you know what, there's a book on cults that I actually really want to read. So oh, and I'm also reading Country Girls by Edna O'Brien with Dina, which I am also really enjoying. Yeah, that's what we've been doing. I hope you're doing well. Let me know what you've been reading, what you've been up to, and yeah, we'll see each other soon. Bye.